do your introduction.
Hi, everybody. Welcome, and thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's my pleasure, absolute pleasure, to introduce Kim Mills. I was very lucky to meet her very recently. She came and spoke at a Health and Wellness Expo that our Military Family Services produced in Washington, D.C. And to rave reviews, she spoke two separate sessions, one directed to the CF members and others to spouses, and I got to say it was really motivational. She really has an amazing way to speak in an endearing way, a funny way, really engaging way, but she really does speak on behalf of a lot of families, and so I'm so grateful that she can be here tonight, especially when she's sharing stories and speaking at all kinds of fundraisers and military events and everywhere from Trenton and Petawawa to Borden, Gagetown, Cold Lake, Meaford, Kananaskis. She's one busy lady, so we are very, very grateful she can join us tonight. So I'll let her take it away and she can fill you in all about her. Thanks, Kim, for joining us.
Thanks, Michelle. Michelle doesn't mention, but she also had me over for my birthday and even had cake, 4 different kinds of cake, just because she didn't know which kind of cake I liked. So I think Michelle's pretty great. Can I ask how many people here, I've done one of these before, how many people here have, were at the last one that I was speaking at? Could you give me a little check mark if you were? Okay, that's only a couple of you, because I was a little bit worried that there would be too many. Because we are talking about resiliency, which is very similar to what we were talking about before, and I don't want you guys to all sit through, something that you've already heard. So I'm going to try to keep it a little bit new. I'm also going to touch a little bit. So this past while I was in DC, obviously the end of February, but I was also in Borden just this past week on this whirlwind 24-hour trip that sounded like a good idea when I booked it, but it really actually wasn't. But I had a lot of fun in Borden. It was more maybe I'll just take the red eye back. It always sounds good when I book it. I'm like, oh, it'll be great. I won't give up a day. And then actually when I'm sitting there at the airport at midnight, I'm like, this was a terrible idea. But next week I go to Gagetown, thankfully not on the red eye. And then I'm in Cold Lake after that, and all of those are for International Women's Day or International Women's Week. It's weird that it's all at different weeks, but I guess we can pick whatever, whenever we want to celebrate that. So I'm going to touch a little bit on, those presentations too, just to kind of keep it fresh. I don't want people to have to listen to the same thing over and over. So can I turn my camera on? I like it if people can see me. I don't know if do I turn it on?
Please do. I just chatted you to say please do, so.
Okay, how do I do that?
To the right of your name, there's a video camera button. Just click on it.
There we go.
It will appear.
So, am I doing that? Can you see me? Oh. All right, can you see me?
We can. Can I just ask, Silvana, would you mind muting yourself? Perfect, thank you.
Okay, good. All right, I couldn't see me, but if you can see me, that's fine. I'm also in my sweatpants, which you can't see, and my kids just got home. So, yeah, we're gonna start. So as you can see, She Is Fierce is up here. So that's the name of the blog. I'm assuming that most of the people that are on there. I like it when you can see me too, Tammy, because I feel like I can't watch if I'm just staring at I can't see the person that's talking. Oh, my husband turned the light on. Okay, that's good. Hi, the light's on now. So, so She Is Fierce is the blog that I've been writing. I've been working on that for about, I think we figured it was about 6 years last time I had to sit down with someone and figure it out. It originally didn't have that name, so when I first started writing, it was mostly because I was asked to do that by CBC and Today's Parent. I did a couple interviews with them. They wanted something that they could fall back on, and so I'm shooing my family down the stairs now so that I can focus on what I'm talking about. And so I created this blog. Originally, it was something like it just had my full name, and I wrote about Remembrance Day because that's what the interviews have been about. when I discovered about a couple of years after I wrote it, I was headed to Houston, and I had started writing a lot about our move and military life. I realized that there was actually like thousands of people reading it that I didn't know all of them. And so we changed it up a little bit, and we changed it into She Is Fierce. So it's been running the way that it is now for just under 4 years. And the best thing that I like about the blog, about the speaking, about all of this that I get to do with She Is Fierce is that it has nothing to do with my story being any different than anybody else's. It has nothing to do with my story being unique or special in any way. When it comes to military families, we all have stories that all share. They're all worth sharing. It has much more to do with the fact that I am able to stand up here, to sit here actually and talk to a wall, which I find much more difficult than talking to a room full of people. I can do that. It doesn't bug me. I am able to stand up and share, and that's why I'm the one that's sharing and not everybody else. And one of the best parts about my job is that I get the chance to hear other people's stories, and every once in a while I help them share theirs as well. So when I was in Washington, we really kind of tried to focus on the fact that military life has been happening much longer than we've been around, obviously. You know, I've been doing this for about 16 years, and I need my husband to go downstairs because he's in my space. I've been doing this for about 16 years, but obviously, like, my mother-in-law was around for much before that. My father-in-law has 5 deployments. And all of those were done at a time, of course, when we didn't have the internet, we didn't have the ability to chat back and forth with our spouses. You know, there was no texting, there was no, you know, a lot of times there wasn't even any phone calls. You know, I remember a story of my mother-in-law telling me when my father-in-law came back from a deployment, he just showed up at the door. And I mean, it had been 6 months and he was just there. You know, he didn't have a way to tell her that he was coming back. Times had changed. You know, the timings had changed, and so she didn't know that he was coming at that time, and then all of a sudden she opens the door and there she is. And there was no, you know, banners, there was no homecoming outfits, there was no reunions. That's just what it was. And I think we've changed. Military culture has changed. Certainly from, you know, the time when my 94-year-old grandfather was in World War II, and, you know, all his family got was, you know, a handful of letters over the course of 4 years. We've certainly changed the way that we look at military life. And while that offers us some perspective, it doesn't necessarily make it easier. It doesn't mean that we don't have, you know, our own challenges and struggles. Research has actually shown that constant communication that we tend to have more and more, depending on our spouse's job when they're away, that constant communication isn't necessarily helping because we are sharing a lot more and it's becoming more difficult. Spouses away can't help with the things that are being shared there. And so we've just opened ourselves up to new challenges and new difficulties that we're going to work through as a community. So I think that as we're looking forward for military spouses, we're looking at our resiliency, that's the kind of thing that, you know, that we want to be able to share. Those are unique experiences. They're unique to us. They're unique to our community. There are lots of things that make us the same as everyone around us, but there are some experiences that really make the military community unique. And in DC, I was really trying to focus on the fact that we do have that as a community. We have a uniqueness, and that if we share that with the people around us, then we're able to support each other in those little things that make us different. So to give you a little bit of background about me, I don't know how many of you guys have actually heard me speak or how many of you guys have followed along for however long on the Facebook page or on the blog or stuff like that. My husband and I got married when we were 19, and I have a picture here. So there's us. Aren't we cute? When we got married, I honestly thought that the biggest influence the military was going to have in our life was that picture. So I figured the sword party was going to be the biggest thing that the military was going to add to our lives. I got to have that picture. I was pretty excited about that picture. I knew nothing about the military. My family is not a military family. There wasn't a base in Calgary when I mean, there was when I was younger, but by the time I was a teenager, the base had moved up to Edmonton. And so I really didn't have any concept of what military culture looked like. Nathan had only been in the forces for about 1.5 years by the time we got married. And he was really just preparing for another Bosnia deployment. And this was by the time that Bosnia was quite stable, and the deployment was really just going to involve a whole lot of things like, you know, sun tanning and working out. So that's really what we thought we were up against when it came to the military. And one thing that, as I look at that picture, I really look at the fact that we felt, you know, grown up and mature, and I look at those guys now, and they felt like they were so much older than us. I felt like they were like these, you know, and now that we've gotten older, like I see, you know, my husband's current sergeant major is in that picture, but I'm pretty sure that he's a trooper in the photo. And I mean, now I look at those same men as I see them now, and I'm like, oh, you know what, they really were only like a few years older than us, and we're the ones that are kind of getting older now. So that really was all I kind of thought about for the military. But you know what, 9/11 happened about 10 months after I got married, and even less. I got married in May, and 9/11 obviously in September happened, and all of a sudden everything changed. I remember watching it, sitting on top of laundry. You know, there's this big pile of laundry in our living room on top of the couch, and I had just got home from a night shift. I worked at a shelter, and I, you know, worked 11 to 7 in the morning, and I got home from this night shift, and somebody called me right when I was falling asleep and told me to turn on the TV, and I'm sitting in front of the TV in our living room on a pile of laundry wearing nursing scrubs, and I'm watching this, and all I could think is that my life is now, whatever happens, like my life has changed. This is going to affect us. And it did. My husband was away at the time that it happened, but within a very short while, he was on the bus, and he went on the very first tour to Afghanistan that Canada did in 2002. Now I have the next picture here. So this is a picture of me and my husband actually just this past spring. We went to Disney World to celebrate the end of his 4th deployment. So we had this is a cute picture. We had obviously, you know, that picture back here. It shows these teenagers getting married, and you know, not even realizing that our first deployment was on the horizon. And I mean, this is us, you know, within the past year, and we're seeing the end of our 4th, and that's kind of the change that we go through, right? And I realized that most of military life, when it comes to the uniqueness, it has a lot to do with the fact that we're trying to reconcile what our life looks like at home, what our life looks like when it's just, you know, your average everyday life that the rest of, you know, the country, the rest of the world is going through, and what makes it different because we're military families. A lot of times I feel like as a culture we don't really do quite well at recognizing that there has to be a middle ground in how we look at things. I like to compare this to gluten. So we as a society like ate all the gluten. Like, yay, bread, we ate all the gluten and all the bread, and then all of a sudden a few years ago we were like, no gluten at all. Nobody's allowed to eat any gluten. And nobody was ever like, maybe if we just had less gluten, like just less, like maybe there's a middle ground there. Nobody ever finds the middle ground. We're always like all one or all the other. But when I married my husband, he had a very specific view in his head. He grew up in the military. His dad was a soldier. His grandfather was a soldier. In his head, you either pretended that the military was just another job and you didn't have anything to do with military culture. You just, you know, sent him to work. He came home from work and that was it. And you didn't, you know, pretend or act like that made you any different than anyone else. And the only other option was that, you know, you lived this life where you wore sweatpants all day that had your spouse's, you know, unit on it, and you know, sat on your front step and you didn't have a job and you lived in base housing. It's like ridiculous stereotype, but those were the two options. That was the only way that he could see that working. You were either one or the other. And so when he joined, it was very common for most military families. They treated the military like it was just another job, and there wasn't a big sense of pride. There wasn't a lot of talking about what made military culture different. It was mostly like the military is just another way that the guys are employed. But we weren't at war, and we hadn't been at war for a very long time, and military culture just kind of moved forward like that. The difference is that I believe that over the past 16 years, I can't reconcile that. I can't treat that as though military culture really works that way. There are two aspects of my life, and one of them is the way that the military affects it. And every once in a while, the military is just this like background, you know, the fact that my husband wears the same thing to work every day, that's all that it is. But posting season comes, or deployment time comes, or even spring exercise comes, and all of a sudden, the military is like the screaming toddler in front of your face being like, no, I am everything, right? And that's all you can see. And we need to be able to recognize that that happens instead of trying to like, you know, push that under the rug and still pretend as though the military doesn't make this a unique culture. So in this photo, you see my husband and I. This is, you know, big badass guy over here with his Mickey Mouse ears on because he was convinced that we were going to, when we went to Disney, that was all him. Like, I wanted to go to Disney. He said if we went to Disney, we had to have those hats. I still don't really know why he's obsessed with those hats, but we all had to have them. And then we had this picture. Like, we still have the hat. It's in our bedroom. So that's my husband and his need for the hats, and that's, you know, how we see him. He's, you know, the guy that I married. I met him when we were 13 years old. I've been married with him for a very long time. We've been married for 15 years. And, you know, when we're out at Disney World, when we're at home making dinner, when we're doing, you know, this is who he is, and this is what our life looks like, and that's all. But this is also my husband. This is an old picture. This is a terrible picture. I don't even know where I found it. I think he's getting a medal or a commendation or a pin or something like that. But this is also my husband, and I have to accept the fact that, you know, at home he can be this guy, and at work he's this guy. And I mean, this is a few years ago, but like Warrant Mills is still the same person as, you know, the dad who insists that we all have Disney hats. And the military life has a lot to do with me reconciling those two personas together, right? So I have this picture here. This is a picture of us moving from Kingston to Edmonton. We just took this picture in the fall. And so there's the 5 of us. There's my husband and I and the kids in the back. So it's Ivy, Caleb, and Jonas. I don't even know what he thinks he's doing. Is that a gang symbol? Like, I don't even, he's 8. I don't know. But that's our family. That's, you know, we might be doing something because we're a military family at that point. I mean, it wasn't our choice to move across the country again. But, you know, you look at that picture and it's just us, and that's who my husband is to us. He is the guy that always drives when he's in the car because it's bad for our marriage if I'm the one driving when he's in the car. He's the one that, you know, is singing with the kids, and he really likes Van Morrison, and these kids, they're just, you know, they're ones that are getting in that car and they're moving again, you know, for the second time in 3 years, back to where they came from Kingston to Edmonton when, you know, we just got there a few years prior. But, and I mean, this is the hard part, right? So this is my husband with his family, but the truth is that if we're going to talk about what the military looks like, that's also my husband with his family. And that's really the definition to me of what separates us as military families, is that I need to accept the fact that just as much as this is what my husband looks like with his family, this is just as much his family as we are, and this is just as much part of his life as we are. And if we're going to seriously discuss what resiliency looks like, we have to really let ourselves wrap our head around the fact that our lives are different, and we're not, you know, we have unique experiences and unique challenges, and a lot of that has to do with reconciling and balancing those two different aspects of our lives. And whether it's just our spouse that's in the forces, whether it's a dual service couple, whether it's, you know, the wife that's in the forces, it doesn't matter. The forces represents a part of a community that we can't really learn to be resilient within until we accept the fact that it's there and it's not going away, and it makes us unique, and it makes us different. So for the rest of the time I'm talking, I have this picture because I hate leaving up the other picture. I can't look at it and continue talking. So we have this adorable photo. Someone sent it to me once. I thought it was great. My husband's a tanker. At least he's part of a tank regiment. And so, yeah, enjoy that photo for a second. So if we're talking about what resiliency looks like within a military family, once we accept the fact that resiliency means that we look different, we need to accept what those differences look like and how we can then embrace those challenges and how we can be resilient through them. So a little while ago, I think about 6 months ago or so, I wrote something, and it was about paintball. So it was about my attempts at paintball. My husband signed us up for this small group that was going to play paintball. It was the first time I'd ever played paintball. I didn't have any interest in playing paintball, but my husband really thought it would be fun. And when we did finally get out there, you know, I had super amount of anxiety. Part of it is, I'm going to try to do this. Part of it is that I really don't enjoy the idea of getting shot at by things. Like, that's why I didn't join the military, really. And part of it was also like it caused me a lot of anxiety. And my husband and I were both wearing his combat, his combat, because apparently paint washes out of it well. My husband's only played paintball a few times, but as I'm advancing with him, and he's like giving orders to people, and you know, our small group is sitting there. They're all civilian families, and he's like, you know, breaking down orders for them as to how we're going to like get across this, and so, you know, everybody's taking this as seriously as he is. And I'm looking at these people being like, this is why we don't have any friends. But they liked it. They and I saw them looking at him, and you know, eventually, you know, I have this sense of pride, because I'm like, they are, you know, you see it when they clue in. They're like, this is what he does. This is what he's good at. This is what he likes. This is not only what he likes to do, but this is what he's good at doing. This is clearly where he fits in. And anyway, in this silly paintball game, we start, and as teenagers, you know, up on a hill telling us what to do, and I put my helmet down, and we advance, and he tells me to do something, and I probably do the opposite because I have no idea what his hand signals mean, and I come up, you know, and I can see him from where I'm hiding, and he's shooting his gun, and at one point he kind of like stands up, and he was trying his very best, and people were like, you know, nervous to play with him because they thought he was gonna, I don't know, I think he's Rambo or something, and he got shot. He got shot with a paintball right in the face, and I'm looking at the paintball, I'm looking at him get shot, and for a minute, like, I'm watching this paint drip off his mask, and I felt awful. I couldn't catch my breath. I thought I was going to be sick. I pulled my mask up, you know, and he's yelling at me to put my mask back down. The game is not over, and eventually someone shoots me in the back, and so, you know, he raises his hand and tells people to go, and he runs over to me, and I'm like, you got shot. Like, this is not, I'm not okay with this. And so I ended up leaving the game. You know, they played for a little bit more, and we get home, and I find myself, you know, kind of curled up in a ball somewhere, and my husband comes over, and he's like, you know what, tell me, like, what this was about. And I said, you know, at first I thought I was just like, I don't like watching you get shot, but eventually I realized what really made me anxious was that he was out of the game. He got shot, and he was out of the game. And I told him, you got shot, you left me there. You left me there to play the game by myself, and I never wanted to play the game by myself. Like, you left me alone because you got shot. And I hadn't really considered up until that point that we spend so much time focusing on how deployment affects the member that when we're really looking at resiliency, we have to really accept the fact that 27 months, which is what we figured was the general idea of how, you know, many months he's been deployed over the course of the past little while. That's a long time to be afraid. And that's a long time to worry about someone ringing your doorbell. That's a long time to get used to going to sleep and you know, staring at a phone thinking, you know, worrying that it might ring or worrying that it might not ring. And that, you can't just make that go away either. So we're watching our spouses, watching the members, and we're worrying about, you know, what experiences they might have had and how that could affect them. And we need to accept the fact that it makes us different too. It makes us different as spouses too, because in some small way, like, we have to then reconcile what that anxiety and that fear looks like from ours as well. And so once we kind of, I think if we can look at that, and I know that I've mentioned it to most people before, but if you have the chance to, I'm going to actually like write the guy's name in here if I can do that. If you've had the chance to ever see Sebastian Junger, and I don't know if that's how you spell his last name. I think that this is right. He has a TED Talk, and he was a journalist in Afghanistan at one point, Afghanistan or Iraq, and he has a TED Talk about why soldiers want to go back to war. And I think that, I don't know how many of you guys work with military families as opposed to just, not just, but as being a military family, I think that for anybody that works with military families in any way, that's really, or anyone that's married to someone, especially someone within a combat trade, it's a must watch. It's something that, like, if you can't wrap your head around, the idea that a member would go to, thank you, that was really fast. If you can't wrap your head around when people ask questions, why would you want to go back? My husband just got back from Task Force Iraq less than a year ago. If someone were to ask him to sign a paper tomorrow and leave, he would. And that doesn't mean that he doesn't want to be around us, and that doesn't mean that he doesn't love his family or cherish his family. That means that he also has a calling to a job that he enjoys. And so I'm not going to focus on that, but I'd like to really recommend that anyone who works with military families does that or looks at that. So once we kind of accept that, once we accept that the military life makes us different, then we need to look at the ways that acceptance can lead us towards creating our own resiliency. And so one of those things is to make sure that at home, when I was talking to members, I was really encouraging them, like, check in with your spouse at home. When I wrote that paintball story, I received more messages from military members than from spouses, which isn't usually the case when I write something. And it was military members that were sending me messages saying, and a lot of them were American. I mean, I had this one lovely American soldier that sent me a message, and he said, in the past, I'm leaving for my 6th deployment in the past 10 years, and I really, my wife said that she was okay, but it occurs to me that I just told her and she didn't, tell me that she couldn't do it, so maybe I should ask her how she's doing. Members need, that kind of support on how they can check in with their spouses. They don't necessarily know, especially, in a traditional family, if it's the man that's in the forces, communication is probably not already a strong suit, but then to ask him to check in with the family and see how they're doing. It also helps us to realize that we're the first line of defense for our spouses. If we want to check in on how our spouse is doing, a member is doing, one of the best ways that we can promote resiliency is to really remember the fact that when things are going to hit the fan, it's going to be the spouse at home that knows first. And if we offer the resources that then the spouse knows how to check in with the member at home, knows how to recognize the signs at home, it's going to be at home that they're going to see those first. And if they can recognize those challenges and they can deal with them head on when they affect them at home, because by the time they get to work, by the time the issues are affecting work and somebody is flagging them at work, it's already too late. Not too late, but it's already far later than it should be. If we want to promote resiliency, we want to catch things in the beginning before they hit crisis, right? That's the definition of resiliency, is being able to deal with things before they are so out of control that you can no longer cope. And generally, by the time the member is being recognized as having an issue at work, the family already can't cope. It's already out of control. But if you can ensure that the families know how to recognize an issue before it gets there, you're going to be that much closer to promoting that resiliency right from the get-go. And that also involves really teaching how to accept help and how to look for help from the start. So on my husband's first deployment, I was pregnant. I was super pregnant. Can you be more pregnant? Like, super pregnant sounds like I was more pregnant than other people. I was pregnant. And my husband got home about 2 weeks before my son was born. When he left, I was about 2.5 months pregnant. And I didn't really know how to ask for help, how to be helped, until I ended up with a group of spouses that really kind of taught me to lean on them. And I mean, I'm still friends with those spouses to that day. But you would think then, like 2 deployments later, my husband's 3rd deployment, I was pregnant again. Because that's what my husband does, just in case like you're following along. He likes to get me pregnant and go to Afghanistan. I told him like he like couldn't go back to Afghanistan after the 3rd baby / deployments because I just am not having any more kids. So when he was on his 3rd deployment, I was pregnant with our 3rd child. And you'd think that I would have learned by then how to ask for help, how to get support, but I hadn't, like, at all, clearly. Because at one point, I found myself, I'm sitting on a bed, my 2 older kids are sick, and I'm calling one of them in sick to school. And this is me, I'm sitting on the phone, I'm sitting on top of my bed, and I'm calling in and I'm saying, you know, Caleb can't come to school today because he is sick. And I like threw up all over my bed. I didn't see it coming. I don't know why, like as a grown woman, but I didn't see it coming. And I got like crazy sick and all over the bed. And after that, like it just like, I don't even, it's a blur in my head. I don't even know what happened. But I was so ill that a day and a half later, I called my friends and I'm laying on the floor of the bathroom. And I had to admit, I said, I don't know where my kids are. I'm assuming they're downstairs. I haven't seen them. And keep in mind, my oldest was 5, and then I had a 2-year-old. I'm lying on the floor of a bathroom, and I'm saying, I don't know. I haven't fed them today. I haven't been able to get off the floor. I don't think that I can walk at this point. I'm pretty sure that I'm in labor. I was 32 weeks. And my girlfriend came, and she got me. And I ended up at the hospital for a couple of days, and, you know, people took my kids. And when I got home that night, or 2 nights later, when I got home from the hospital eventually, I pulled in the front, and all my lights are on, and I get in the door, and there's these women in my house, and they are, you know, I walk in, and I get into my kitchen, and there's this one woman, she has all of my fridge contents on the floor, and she's, like, her head is inside the door, and she's washing my fridge, and there's someone downstairs in the laundry room, and I mean all that laundry, like, you guys, I had not washed anything, like it like was puke filled from like 3 people having the stomach bug, and they were rinsing out and they were washing my laundry, and they were, you know, vacuuming the carpets, and my kids were off somewhere else while someone was watching them, and that's amazing. But what that was crisis management. That is family. Those were amazing friends, and I don't know that I could have done the next few weeks before my husband came home on HLT or before the baby was born without them. But that was crisis management. Resiliency. Resiliency would have been me having it within myself to ask for help from the beginning. It would have been me not getting to the point where nobody's been fed and I'm on the floor of my bathroom and I can't get up, right? Because then it's a crisis and I can't cope. Crisis management worked in that case, and it needed to happen. But what would have been the best is if I would have been able to ask for help from the very beginning. If I would have been able to, make that phone call from when I first got sick, or even before that, when my kids were sick, and ask for someone's help to do some laundry or whatever it happens to be, right? I know that it's hard because I haven't done it. You'd think, you know, I can't tell you that it's going to be easy because clearly I haven't done it either. It sounds, one of those things that sounds good in theory, but what I like to remind myself is that I hate it when I've accepted help from someone else, and then when they need help, they're not willing to ask me. It makes me feel like I was a charity case for them, that they feel less of me because I need help, but they don't. And I remind myself that that's how I feel when I don't want to ask for help, because I have been the one to reach out and help somebody. And I like to assume that they would like to reciprocate. It makes people feel like they are in an actual friendship and not just being supported. And people like to feel that way, right? I like to feel that way. I like to feel like I'm part of a friendship, not that I'm just somebody's charity case that they're looking after. And so I remind myself that when I'm, you know, in whatever situation I'm in and I don't want to ask for help, that it doesn't feel good when somebody doesn't want to ask you. for support, especially when you're the one that's been giving them support. So once we have things like seeking help, we really encourage people to be able to ask for help, to be able to, to be able to ask for help before it gets out of control. We need to look at, the couples that make up the military family as well, and realize that, I know within my husband's unit right now, marriages, relationships are in a crisis. They've, recognized that there's just been a sky high, even more so than usual, dissolution within relationships. And, a lot of that has to do with the tempo of operations during the war. When I was out with one of the squadrons, talked to some of the young guys, and they were talking about marriages that had broken up, and they were really shocked. And I admitted that, I'm not. When I look at the military, and when I look at some of these new marriages, a lot of times I really have to remind myself that to get involved, because I've seen a lot, it's been 15 years, and I think a lot of us can probably relate to the fact that I've seen a lot of relationships come and go. I've seen a lot of spouses come and go over that time. And I told one of them once, I felt like every time they had a new relationship that it was the same as when my parents used to get kittens when I was a kid, and we also lived next to a park where the coyotes lived, and it got to the point where I felt like every time we got a new kitten, we were just feeding the coyotes. Every time they got out of the house, they were not coming back. And this young guy looked at me like, "Are you calling me a coyote?" And he's like, "No, I'm calling the military a coyote." We need to have the walls up there. We need to have relationships to a point where there's, we're fighting for what's on this side of the relationship, because the military is not going to make it easier. And that doesn't mean that, marriages out when the military is not involved are easy. But we have to recognize that the military is that extra stressor. And if we're going to, create resilient marriages, we need to realize that, it's about it's not about just learning how to deal with the military. It's about really supporting marriages so that marriage is worth fighting the military for, because sometimes that is honest to goodness what you're doing, right? And you need to be able to, I think we give a lot of tools to people to say, this is how to cope with, this is how to deal with, this is how to, but instead we could be doing just building up those marriages to make it worth all that extra effort, to make it worth that fight, right? Nobody wants to put in that extra time to fight for a relationship if we haven't spent that time really on it. Royal Canadian Divorce Force, well, that's, I don't actually know what the statistics are, whether or not they're that much higher within the Canadian Forces. I know within some units they're higher than within, the rest of society. I know that in the States, they recognize that marriages are at a much higher rate of divorce within the combat trades than they are within, the the civilian population. I don't actually know within Canada if it's all that much higher. I don't know that we've ever done any statistics into it. It would be interesting to find out. But so again, a lot of this resiliency, I think, and this is where we'll kind of move into what. Yeah, adultery is still something that you can get punished for. I don't know that it happens all that often, but you can. Yeah. I don't know that, I want to move a little bit past the idea of resiliency, not because it's not the same thing, but one thing that we kind of talked about in the second half of our DC talk was about the difference between endurance and resiliency, right? And so, and this is something we talked about at the last WebEx too, but it's the idea that some of us are in this for 30 years, right? My spouse has a 25-year contract. I will be shocked if that's the end of it for him. So I feel like I am taught a lot of the time that I need to just get through something more to do with the military. You don't like this posting? It's not going to last forever. Just get through it. This deployment comes up, just get through it. This 6 months, this 9 months, this 3 years, whatever it is, just get through it. 31 years, see? Some of us are doing this for a really long time. But if we're just getting through an entire career, I look at that and be like, I got married at 19. My husband might retire when we're, what, 44, if he does. That's a long time to be enduring your life, isn't it? Like, that's a long time to just be hoping that that you can make it through instead of really enjoying the time that you have, really accepting it for its challenges and being able to really enjoy it while it happens. And so if we want to teach resiliency, I feel like we're setting people up to fail if it's always just get through this little bit, get through this little bit, get through this little bit. The more we say get through this, then we're just treating military life as though it's just something that you have to grin and bear it through, right? Like you're getting a cavity filled. Like your entire military life, your entire spouse's military life cannot be one big cavity, okay? Like the only other time I can think of when somebody tells us to just, close your eyes and hope it happens quickly is like when I have to go to the dentist, right? And even then I get laughing gas, so I have kind of something to look forward to. We can't spend an entire 25, 30 plus year career just getting through it. And there's different ways that we can learn to enjoy it. I think that if we do things like teach ways that you can have an instead of military life, a lot of times because the military gets to dictate where we live and the military gets to dictate whether our spouse is home, whether we get to have holidays together or not. That's just a reality. I mean, there's lots of things the military doesn't have control over, but it has control over where I live. It decides if I live in Kingston, it decides if I live in Edmonton, it decides if I live in Gagetown or Wainwright, or I've never got to live in Florida. One of you guys is in Florida. That would be a lot better option than like Wainwright or Gagetown. But it gets to decide where I live and whether or not I live near family. It gets to decide whether or not my spouse is going to spend Christmas with me or if he's going to be there for our child's birthday. Like those are the things that we have to accept that it's just out of our control. And we can really reframe that into if they can't be there for that, instead of just pretending that it doesn't happen, instead of just making the best of it, having it, we can reframe that to be what can you do instead that you couldn't do otherwise, right? Let's say that you live somewhere that you don't particularly, you don't live near family. What do you get to do? One of the things that our kids, if you ask our kid, what was the good thing about living so far away from extended family? They would say, because for Christmas we went to the movies and ate pogos. And, there was no big dinner, there was no big fancy whatever. For 2 of the years that we were in Kingston, we literally went and saw The Hobbit and then went home and had like hot dogs and french fries. And my kids actually thought that was the best ever because there was nothing that they had to rush back to. They enjoyed their time with their family, but they ended up looking forward to that. We got to travel a lot more. Like we've really taught that when we live somewhere new, when we have to move somewhere new, when we moved from Kingston to Edmonton, we somehow convinced Brookfield that Nashville was on the way. Nashville. I don't know if you've seen a map. Nashville is not on the way from Kingston to Edmonton, but technically it is moving in that direction. And so you're allowed to go there as long as we made it in the right number of days. And my kids got to go to Nashville. And their favorite part about moving is the road trip there and back. And we've stayed in some pretty cool places and we've visited some great ways. And if you've followed along with my blog for more than a year, then you know that last Christmas, my spouse didn't get to come home. And he was, overseas. And I really, up until 2 days before Christmas, I was like, you know what? We're going to just power through, right? We're just going to get through Christmas and, pretend that it was the same, and next Christmas it'll be better. And 2 days before, my son said, I don't want to do Christmas like that. I don't want to do Christmas if Daddy's not home. And I thought about that, and he, left for the day, and I booked a trip, and we drove to Manhattan for Christmas. I had always wanted to go to Manhattan and had never been. And my husband, the idea of a big city like that with all those people, it's not his idea of a good time. And so I packed up the kids at 4 in the morning, and we drove to Manhattan. And I got to spend Christmas morning, and we woke up Christmas morning in overlooking Times Square. We got to spend Christmas Eve at Rockefeller Center with a big tree, And that was something, like, my kids had an amazing experience when we were in Manhattan. And I realized that, like, I would have, of course, I would have traded anything to have my husband home for Christmas. Like, we all, we have to say that it's a given. But I never would have had the chance to have that experience at Christmas. And my kids wouldn't have had the chance to have that experience at Christmas. And it's okay for me to say that I'm glad that we had that experience. It doesn't mean that I didn't want him home. What it means is that I'm glad that we had the chance to do something new. And there's a freedom in being able to embrace the good that comes out of what could be conceived as negative experiences. Resiliency, I believe, is really built on finding the positives in your situations. And so I just wanted to kind of wrap up here. We have a few more minutes, and I wanted to leave it open to have a chat and see, what people's thoughts were and that kind of thing. But when I was in Borden, I was starting off all of the talks I'm going to do in the next little bit on women, strong women in the forces and stories that we have from that. And I don't know if, for those of you that were at the talk that I did, the WebEx that I did in January, one of the other people, and I made this joke while I was there, one of the other people that was also sharing in the January one with Margaret was Jody Middick. I actually watched his as well. And I must have joked back and forth with Margaret for like 3 weeks about the fact that I did not want to write a biography when Jody was also going to write a biography. Because, come on, you guys. Like, so Jody gets to write this biography that's like, I was a sniper, and then, I lost my legs in Afghanistan, and I was, part of Soldier On, and I ran like half marathons without legs, and then I became a city councilor. And then I got to write a bio that was like, I write crap on the internet, and my mom almost always likes it, Like, so those are 2 biographies, and I, like, did not want to write my own. Because I figured I didn't have a whole heck of a lot to put on the table, especially not when I was speaking, in the same conference as someone like Jody. But I realized that what I did have to offer was something like, it was stories. It was things that people related to. And when I asked people to share on She Is Fierce who had influenced them as women of strength, I had a lot of people that messaged me and they said that it was me. And I found that that was really strange to think about because that's not how I would see it. Most of the time, like the last time I did a WebEx, my shirt was inside out. This time it's not, for the record. But I realized that part of building our community is realizing that we all have something to share, right? We all have something to share. And for me, it's the ability to share my story and to help people share their own stories, to be able to empower people to realize the power that they have in stories. I don't know how many of you guys follow along with MFS, but the MFS Facebook page has started running Real Military Families. And when you look back on it, and I kind of, I feel a little justified about, my idea about stories being the biggest, draw for people, is that military family, the Real Military Family hashtag that MFS has started, has the most engagement of anything that they share. Because people are drawn to other people's stories. They're drawn to wanting to know that they're not alone, to know that other people are doing the same thing as them. And that's what helps build a community, is really understanding that there's other people out there and that there's other people that you can relate to. And so, I mean, the stories that I had shared to me about how people had really supported them, none of it was I really had this woman that, or this group that showed up at my house, and as soon as my husband left, they took care of everything for me. That was never what anybody shared. What people did share was, I met this amazing group of people that we did Christmas, and we ended up doing Christmas dinner together, right? I just read that on here. You guys were talking about how you had 10 people over for Christmas dinner. I've done that as well, like when we've, been able to open our home and have younger families or families that are away from their extended family over for our house for Christmas. You get to have these big groups and you get to see each other. And they were talking about how they're talking about other spouses that were able to to come by and just offer, you know, have coffee with them, create friendships with them. None of the stories that people told me about how they were supported the best over their military life involves them being handed things. None of them involves them receiving free Christmas presents. None of them involves them, you know, all of those things I'm sure stood out for them as kind and helpful and useful, but none of them stood out as the biggest way that they felt supported. All of the ways they felt supported were always people inviting them for holiday meals, welcoming them into their home, creating friendships with them, people that they still knew, people that were willing to have coffee with them, were willing to meet them for dinner, were willing to give them a phone call. That was always what they recognized as the biggest way that they were supported. So as we wrap up, because I don't want to keep you guys late, because it's like 10 o'clock where some of you are, and that's really late. I just want to make sure that that's kind of where I leave it off, to recognize that in my opinion, this is where resiliency is found. And so I just went last week, on March 2nd. It's the anniversary of a soldier from my spouse's unit that was killed in Afghanistan. It's someone that actually from that photo that I showed at the ramp ceremony, that would be that individual. And whenever we're in the area, my husband has a chance to go and be with them for those days. And usually it's, you know, for days like Remembrance Day and for days like the anniversary of when he was killed. And not all the guys get to go all the time. This last time there was 4 or 5 of them, I think, that were there. And I mean, it's a big unit, but a lot of people have been posted, have retired, have, you know, are on course, are on exercise, they're not around. But whenever they have that chance to be around, that's where they are. And these guys, like, we hadn't had the chance to be there. My husband hadn't had the chance to be there in 3 years because we had lived away. And so he showed up for the first time again, and you know, most of the people were there were retired. He hadn't seen them in you know, 3+ years. And it didn't make one single lick of difference, I got to tell you, because they were there for each other, because they all knew that this was a hard time, and it wasn't some big touchy-feely, you know, we didn't have to have a social worker show up. You know, this wasn't organized by the regiment, it wasn't organized by MFS, it wasn't organized by anybody. It was just these guys know on this day at this time, every year, somebody is there, and they just hang out together, and they talk about whatever they want, and they have a few beer, or they have coffee until 1 in the morning, or whatever it happens to be, but they're there for each other, and that's because they have a community, they have a family of each other. And our spouses get to have that as soon as they walk into the unit. They instantly have friends, right? Spouses don't necessarily have that, and I think that when I talk to other spouses, that's what they're craving, more so than, you know, childcare and Christmas parties and that kind of, they're craving that community. They're craving having that moment of walking in and feeling like they're home, feeling like they're with their family when they are with other military spouses. And I think that that's really the best way that we're going to encourage resiliency. So I think at this point, if anybody has any questions or things they'd like to add, I don't know a lot about where you guys are coming from that are speaking here. Yeah, now's the time to do that. So, or you can just look at this kitty.
So just a note too, if you look down in your chat box, Michelle Shorek has put her email in, mfs.washington@cfmws.com, and she'd love to hear your feedback about our lovely guest speaker, Kim, tonight. And then, so just, I did have to mute a couple of you, so if you raise your hand, I'll know if I muted you if you want to ask any questions. And I'll start the questions, Kim, if that's okay. So we work a lot of the people here today work with Military Family Services US. And so, of course, when families get posted there, you know, it's not just a new community, but it's a new community in a different country, and a lot of those communities are a little bit smaller, right? There may be only 20 Canadian families there. What would you suggest to us? How can we make our families feel that instant connection, that instant friendship? Like, what would you suggest that we could do for our families? And oh, and thank you, Barb. And Yellowknife too is sort of a part of our group as well because it's so remote.
Yeah. You know, I've never met anyone who didn't love being posted to Yellowknife. I've never been there, but everybody seems to really like it there. You know what? When I was having dinner with Michelle and in the time that I was in DC, like I know that it's very difficult to connect families, especially when they're geographically quite a distance from each other. And when they come from very different backgrounds. So I know at the embassy, I mean, we had there's soldiers, there's airmen, there's sailors, and they're all at different points in their career, and they're all at different parts in their life too. You're not necessarily going to they do have to be willing to, you can't do it without the families. But you're not always going to necessarily be able to gauge what each different group of family is looking for. You're going to have young families, you're going to have empty nesters, you're going to have young couples or single members or any of those, combinations. I think that everybody likes to feel useful. So I think that if you offer people the chance to share, to help, to be an encouragement to other families, then they get that option. I think celebrating the diversity of that is really great. I think a lot of times we're like, let's keep all of the young families over here. Let's keep all of, the empty nesters over here. Everybody, wants to meet people that are just like them. And I think that we're doing a little bit of a disservice that way because young families need empty nesters to be able to, everybody has something different to offer, something different to share. Maybe, that empty nester couple, the spouse isn't working right now and she would love to, have coffee with and support the young family. All of those are ways that people can get together that don't necessarily have to do with where they are in their life stage. But at the same time, I was just having a chat earlier this evening with the woman who's taken over the Family Network program that I started in Kingston, and she was really frustrated with some of the families and how it was kind of going with that. And the truth is, you can't make anybody do anything that you don't want to. And you can't make people have a community. And I think that this is going to be a systematic Canadian Forces change. We're not going to be able to all of a sudden just be like, hey, you guys, treat this like your family. We're going to have to really spend time slowly integrating people back into a place where they feel like that's what they have. I really like the idea that you guys are reaching out to people online before they arrive. So I know Michelle was talking about the fact that people were really contacting them, through the process of what is it that you do, selection or whatever, like to make sure that you can go there. If people are starting there from the very beginning and starting to connect, I think that that's really going to help. I think that that's really going to give people an idea. I think that location can sometimes help. I know we talked about in DC and even in some of the bigger cities here, if people have to, drive downtown and find parking to get to something, and it's an hour commute, they're probably not going to be as interested. We found within my husband's unit, offering things like family days, a chance to embrace the military aspect of it. The Strathconas have the luxury of having military vehicles and tanks, and they get to have these, and they have these family days where there's tank rides and there's paintball shooting and there's ranges, and they've got obstacle courses set up, and that brings the families out. And when the families are there, we have representatives from the spouses group that then walk around and introduce themselves and try to get that connection with those younger or newer families to the regiment. So I think when you have those events that really get people out, then you can make that connection with somebody. And the best way that you're ever going to get people to come out is if they feel connected to the people that are inviting them. If they feel like they've been personally invited to something and they feel like they're connected to the person that invited them. So, and I also love potlucks. And I am very specific that I like potlucks where you don't tell people what they have to bring, because sometimes potlucks are exactly what you needed at the time. If potlucks are all dessert, that's because that's what people wanted. They want dessert, okay? So.
I like the way you think. Does anybody else have any questions before we let Kim go tonight? Just raise your hand. That's that little tool right below the chat panel, the hand. So, all right. It looks like everybody's being shy tonight, unusual, but we had a lot of great comments in the chat throughout. So, Kim, thank you. Michelle, is there anything you'd like to say to wrap up?
Just a big thank you again for Kim coming and talking again. We hope that her doing this in adjunct to her talk in DC was able to reach out to some of our more remote folks. And I see that everybody in the chat box, all the attendees are kind of from all over the place. So, I mean, that it satisfied that piece of it for me. So I'm really happy to see everybody out from all over the place. So thank you, Kim, again. Your words are inspirational. And thanks, everyone, for coming.
Really difficult to talk to the wall. Like, and not hear people. I can't hear people's responses. Like, I don't think people realize how hard it is to talk when you can't, like, see the people you're talking to. Because you say something and nobody responds. So hopefully you guys all got
and Joanne, go ahead and unmute yourself and share your comment with Kim, because I think it's nice for her to hear it.
Well, I just want you to know, Kim, that just to keep doing what you're doing, because it's so important, especially for the young military wives out there, to get, to find out that, yes, there are hard times, and yes, you're going to, go through hard times, but with support, and don't be afraid to ask for it, you can get through them, and I think that's a really important message, and just thank you for doing that.
Thanks.
All right, thank you so much. What a great group from all across Canada and the United States. So what a pleasure getting to spend our Thursday evening together. Kim, I agree, keep doing what you're doing. We love hearing from you. And hopefully we can have you back again.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Thanks, guys.
All right, thanks, everybody. To X out of the system, just close out your browser. The red X in the upper right-hand corner if you're on a PC, and the red dot in the upper left-hand corner if you're on a Mac. Thanks, everyone. Hope to see you at more virtual programs in the future.
Good night, everybody. I'm now go and watch and see what Trump does to himself.
I'm sure it'll be entertaining, Barb. Thanks so much.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Kim. Thanks, Joanne. Very